Welcome back to the whole nine yards here. Drew Pien with no Brandon Krikorian. Brandon is busy today, so I am doing this solo. First thing before we get into the games and all the NBA stuff is feel free to check out the Clips channel. I've recorded a few episodes just of random stuff, draft lottery reaction, a mock draft, reaction to a Colin Coward video. Feel free to check all that stuff out. I thought it was pretty solid content watching it over. Maybe it's just because I don't know, I'm selfish and I like to watch myself or something. I don't know, but feel free to check that stuff out. We're just gonna get right into it. Basically, I'll start with the Phoenix and Los Angeles Clippers series. Game 3 has happened since Brandon's recorded last, I'm pretty sure, and the Clippers, to my surprise, were able to win Game 3 behind pretty much a solid game from everybody. Paul, I just thought the series was over. To be honest, the Phoenix Suns had won games 1 and 2. They had the momentum. I thought it was different than the Mavs series and the Jazz series. The Clippers had so much more talent. I just thought that they were going to come back and they were going to have it. I just had a different feel in those two series, but the Clippers were able to come back without Kawhi, and Phoenix was at full strength, quote unquote, but we'll get to that. They were able to will themselves to a Game 3 victory and keep themselves in the series at least for another game. And to touch on the Suns, Chris Paul was not healthy. He was not healthy at all. He shot something not great, and it's not that he's injured. It's just that coming back from missing, basically 10 plus days of doing nothing essentially, just to come back in the middle of a playoff series, a heated playoff series where the Suns are fighting for their lives. It's tough to do that. It's really tough to come back in this series, and I wasn't expecting Chris Paul to have an outstanding game, but I did expect him to probably play better than he did. He didn't, so all right. And looking at Devin Booker with the broken nose, he had the mask on. I don't know if that was what impacted him or not, but he shot not great either. He was 5 for, I don't even know what he was, but it wasn't great. I could look at it now, but yeah, bad games from Booker, from Paul. Yeah. Booker was 5 for 21 and Paul is 5 for 19. That's just, you're probably not going to win a game when your two best players shoot a combined, 10 for 40. I mean, that's 25%, from the field. So that's just tough. It really is. I expect Game 4 to be different for them. I do, 100%. We'll see, how much better Chris Paul is. I'm not sure. I expect him to be better than 5 for 19. Is he going to be 100%? Probably not. But he should get acclimated into the series. He should be fine. Booker, I'm expecting good things from. We'll see if he wears the mask or not for Game 4. I'd assume the doctors want him to, but, we've seen athletes that just get so frustrated with that mask and they just take it off and whatever. I would assume in the Western Conference Finals, Booker he's a Mamba mentality type of guy. He looked up to Kobe Bryant, so he's so competitive that if that thing's bothering him, even just the slightest, that he would, want to risk breaking his nose even more or whatever, or injuring his face even more just to not have to deal with that thing. And I'm not saying that's smart or it's not. I'm not giving any input on it. I'm just saying I'd assume that's how he's thinking if that is bothering him, which I would assume it is. Ayton has been the biggest surprise for the Suns this playoffs in general, but even I guess just this series, he's been great. He's started to live up to that first overall pick, and he's never going to live up to it compared to Doncic and Trae Young probably, but he's looked great. I thought he was going to end up being like not Andrew Bogut, but kind of around that level, like after the first year or two, once Doncic looked great and Trae Young looked outstanding, it was like, wow, well, Ayton's going to be overshadowed. He's kind of going to be this guy that's like, yeah, he's good, but once you have to pay him, do you really want to pay him? And he's looked better than what I thought he was after his first year. I mean, he's looked great. He's looked like a guy who can be a number 3 on a championship team, and he's only going to get better. He's only in his, this is his 3rd year in the league, right? So it hasn't been long at all. It really hasn't been long. And yeah, he's not as good as Trae Young right now, or not as good as Doncic, but he's got room to grow. And that's what's honestly fascinating about this Suns team, and at least in the first two games, was without Chris Paul. And I know the Clippers didn't have Kawhi, but they were able to win both games. And obviously, game two, maybe they shouldn't have won, but they did. They willed it out. And thanks to the Paul George missed free throws and the outstanding pass by Jay Crowder and a nice finish by, and they were able to go up 2-0 in the series without Chris Paul. So, I mean, when you look at the core, it's Devin Booker, who's, 24? DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, even Cam Payne's young. I'm not sure you'd count him as your core, but just Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton alone, I mean, that's you're going to have a bright future if you're Phoenix, and you're going to have to pay him eventually, and Chris Paul's not going to be here in the next, after the next couple years, but I think you have a bright future. You have to be happy if you're a Suns fan. Game 4, looking at game 4, it looks like Kawhi's out for game 4, right? I can look that up quickly, but I'm almost positive he's out for game 4. Yeah, he's out for game 4. We'll see. I don't know who I would pick in this game. If you made me pick, it's so tough because I think the Suns are just the better team, and I don't think it's the same as the Jazz series, and I don't think it's the same as the Mavs series, where this team should be able to come back down 2-0. But the Clippers are the higher seed. That, if you win your games at home, this series goes to a game 7, and who knows what happens in a game 7? Anything can really happen in game 7. It's one game. You have to rely on Paul George to have a big game, obviously. Paul George cannot have a small game here. He needs to go for 35 plus, probably 5 rebounds, 5 assists, probably, for them to win, assuming Chris Paul's better and assuming Devin Booker's better. I'm going to take the Clippers. I think they fight to keep it alive a little bit longer. If they go down 3-1, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough for them to will their way back in the series, just because, again, it's going to be tough to win 3 straight against the Suns team. They've shown they're resilient. They're outstanding, and they have the talent to the point where, if you're down 3-1, odds are the Suns are just going to have a game where they may not even play well, but if they just shoot well, they're going to win. So it's tough to come back 3-1 against this type of team. I'm going to take the Clippers. I think it'll be close. It's going to be a close game. Paul, I'm sure, will be better. I think Booker will 100% be better. I think he'll have a solid game. He'll go back to himself. Maybe not, 40-point Devin Booker, 48-point Devin Booker, but he'll have himself a game. Paul George will have to have himself a game, and the role players on the Clippers will have to step up. At least one of them, at least Reggie Jackson or Marcus Morris, is going to have to go, 5 for 9 from 3, 20-plus points, and play good defense. I'm looking at Marcus Morris. His team kind of lives and dies by Marcus Morris's performance, really. Marcus Morris can either go, and I think Brandon said it in one of our podcasts recently, but he'll either go 5 for 9 from 3, and the Clippers will look unstoppable because they have so much depth. And then the next game, Marcus Morris goes 0 for 6 from 3 or 1 for 7 from 3, and then it looks like the Clippers have no talent outside of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So you really do have to kind of rely on those players to step up, because I don't think the Clippers have as much depth as I thought they did and other people thought they did. I just think a lot of the players just aren't as good as we thought, like a Reggie Jackson, even a Marcus Morris to an extent. Not that he's not as good, it's just not as consistent as we wanted, not nearly as the playoffs, because the Clippers were, I want to say they were the best 3-point shooting team in history of the NBA this regular season, and they've looked inconsistent from 3 the playoffs. They've been inconsistent. But if Marcus Morris can shoot consistently and Reggie Jackson can put up points, I like this team to win game 4. And the thing to this series is, can Kawhi come back? Because if Kawhi comes back, I love the Clippers in this series. But if he can't, then, I don't. And I still think it'll be a close series regardless, because I just think both of these teams have really fought to get here. I mean, the Suns, they sweep the Nuggets, but they also had a pretty tough series against the Lakers that they proved that they're a real team. I think both teams are real. Both teams understand that you don't just get to the Western Conference Finals that easily. LeBron has, out of the 3 years he's been on Lakers, he's only been there once, and he's the best player of all time, maybe, or at least since Michael Jordan, at the very least. So yeah, it's a tough series. I haven't looked into too much on, I know Kawhi Leonard's ACL injury is an ACL injury, but is he coming back soon? Because that's what it's gonna come down to. And even if he comes back, he can't be, 40% Kawhi Leonard, who has to take basically all the plays off and basically can't play defense, because that's, you're not getting Kawhi Leonard at that point. He needs to be able to play both sides of the court. late in games, he needs to be the guy that, gets you your mid-range bucket and then, gets you your stop and forces a bad shot by Devin Booker or Chris Paul. Without that, it's going to be tough to really compete with the Suns late in games, especially late in the fourth quarter. It's tough when you have to rely on somebody like Paul George, who already blew one game for you. I mean, let's be honest. Paul George has proven the doubters wrong with the playoff pandemic thing, but he pretty much cost you game two. I mean, just those 2 free throws. I'm not saying it was all his fault, but if you have Kawhi for that game, you win that game 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, you win that game. So yeah. Looking at the other series, though, the Eastern Conference Finals, Game 1 was just an absolute shocker to me. It was. I was kind of expecting the Bucks to just kind of come out and pretty much prove to the world that the Atlanta Hawks aren't as good as everybody thinks and that the Bucks are better than everybody thinks, even though they just beat the Nets. And people do want to say, though, that it was because Harden and Kyrie were hurt, which isn't wrong. I just think the Nuggets or the Bucks have something to prove still, and they wanted to prove that against the Hawks. They pretty much, they got owned by Young. Young went off. He had like 48 points, and everybody on the Hawks looked good. Herter looked awesome. I know Bogdanovich has been injured, but that team looked great Game 1, and it was a shocker to me, a shocker to many, but I did have faith in the Bucks that they were going to come back, and they're still going to win the series, I think. In Game 2, that's exactly what they did. They pretty much blew out the Hawks in the first quarter. It was pretty much over when they jumped out to like 30-point lead or something by the half or something like that, or in the third quarter. It was pretty much over by then. And I think this is the Bucks series. I really do. I think they're the better team. I know they lost Game 1. They've lost a lot of Game 1s, though. They really have. If you look back in their recent series, they like to lose Game 1. Sorry. Yeah, but I think this is the Bucks series. I don't have too much confidence in the ability of Trae Young to carry this team further than he already has. He's already done so much that I just, to beat this Bucks team too would be insane, right? And that's when you legitimately have to start saying, okay, is Trae Young just better than everybody thinks he is? Does he make everybody around him better to the point where he's better than just what he can do himself, kind of like LeBron or like a Magic did in his day, and a Steve Nash even to a certain extent. If he could beat the Bucks, we'd have to start getting to that. I know the recency bias on Trae Young is ridiculous. The media bias is ridiculous. People are hyping him up probably more than he deserves, but he really has done so much. And there have been people that are anti-Trae Young, and I wouldn't say I'm anti-Trae Young or a Trae Young fan by any means. Fanboy. I'm kind of in the middle on it. I think Trae Young is much better than everybody thought he was going into the playoffs. Like I liked the Knicks in that series, and clearly I was wrong. I liked the Sixers in their series. Clearly I was wrong. I like the Bucks in this series, and I'm going to keep doubting Trae Young. And if he keeps proving me wrong, that's going to be insane. I do like the Bucks in this series, but we've heard talks on, is Trae Young better than Kyrie? Is Trae Young the top 5 point guard in the league? And personally, I'm at the point where I'm actually willing to say that Trae Young is better than Kyrie Irving. And it's not based off skill. It's not because I think Trae Young's a better shooter or a better ball handler, because Kyrie has some of the best handles in the league, or basically of all time, pretty much. He might be the best ball handler of all time, just in terms of, ooh-ah moments where he just has some insane moves and he just pulls off something crazy that you just can't even fathom. But I think Trae Young has the ability, like I was saying, to make people around him better. If you build a team around Trae Young, I think he looks better than somebody like Irving does. I think Irving may be better in a team like the Nets, where you just have so much talent that, your talent's going to carry you, and you don't need to, make your Herders and your DeAndre Hunter, if he was healthy, your DeAndre Hunters and your Bogdanoviches and your Collins. Like, you don't need to facilitate to those guys and make them better. You don't have to do that. Then Irving may be better, but who has a better shot at winning a championship, being the number one on their team? The answer to that is, with 100%, no doubt in my mind, Trae Young. His mentality, he seems super loyal to the city of Atlanta, that he's got that killer instinct. He's got that, we've seen the memes and stuff on the internet. He embraces being the villain, and he embraces being this guy in Atlanta. He embraces being their leader, and he's not an idiot in the post-game interviews. He's not a punk. He answers questions how they should be answered, and I love that with Trae Young personally. I think, honestly, that's the argument to make on why you'd rather have him than Doncic. And I'm not going to make that argument today. But if you paid me to make that argument, or you wanted me to make that argument, that's the sole thing that you'd have to go to is, yes, he is a more loyal person than Doncic. He's not as much of a diva as Doncic. He's not an Odell Beckham like Doncic may be. Who knows? We'll see on that. He's more of a, he's closer to Tim Duncan than he is to, and Damian Lillard than he is to, Kevin Durant in terms of loyalty. And I think that's something that's worth a lot, especially in a city like Atlanta. It's not worth as much when, you're in Brooklyn, right? Because Brooklyn, you have KD there, you have Harden there, and it's, right next to New York and all that stuff. And, it's, you don't need that loyalty because, you just signed him. You don't need that. But in a city like Atlanta, you need the loyalty. You need the guy who's willing to be the villain, who's willing to, the chance, and he embraces the chance, the Trae Young chance in New York and Philly and Milwaukee. It's a thing of beauty, honestly. It's refreshing in this league. It really is refreshing. Having to watch Kyrie for so long in Boston and watching all these players and listening to all the rumors, is this guy gone? Does this guy want out? Having guys like Lillard and Young and, we'll see on a guy like Tatum, eventually, but having these guys that are just loyal to their cities, regardless of if it's big town or small town, is very refreshing, because having to deal with guys like LeBron, and I like LeBron, LeBron, Kevin Durant, you can go on and on and on. All these guys that just want out. Anthony Davis, Zion Williamson is probably a guy who's going to be like that too. We'll see. I'm not even blaming them. I'm just saying it's refreshing to really have a guy that, embraces being the guy and embraces being a villain and embraces being loyal to their town, even if it means they may not want to ring, and eventually they may get criticized for it. And I may be a guy that criticizes them for it, but I'll have to come back to this video and look myself in the mirror and say, Trae Young may never win a ring in Atlanta, but there's something more refreshing about this, and honestly maybe makes him a better player, that he's willing to stay in Atlanta. And it's early, so who knows, but it's refreshing to see this type of mentality, the same mentality that Isaiah Thomas had in Boston, than having to deal with a guy like Zion. And Zion may go down as a better all-time player, but in terms of, what do I like and what do I like to watch and who's going to be my favorite players of all time whenever, Trae Young and Zion Williamson's era is retiring, I'm 95% sure that I'm going to like Trae Young much more than I'm going to like Zion all time. It's just, I'm not going to talk about it much more, but you understand why I and many others will like Trae Young more than they like people like Zion and maybe even Luka. And I love Luka. He's going to go down as... He's the guy that has potential to go down as the best player of all time. And I mean, that's a lot to say. That's his potential. So yeah. But that's the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. If you're making me give official predictions right here, right now, by the way, as I'm recording this, it is Phoenix is up 2-1. Milwaukee is tied with Atlanta 1-1. If you're making me predict, I would go with Los Angeles. Do I want to go LA in that series? It depends on Kawhi. I think Kawhi's out. I think he's done. But if Kawhi comes back, it's the Clippers. If he doesn't, it's the Suns. That's my prediction. If I'm having to gamble on whether or not he comes back and you want my hard prediction, it's 100% the Suns, because I don't trust Kawhi to come back. I think he might be done for the series. And if he comes back, I think he's going to be, have a positive impact on the team, clearly, definitely 100%, but he may not be 100%, which he probably won't be. He might not be able to play defense, so it might even be similar to what Harden had. His was a hammy, but it could be similar to the point where he, if Kawhi can't make cuts, that's what you have to do in basketball, obviously, and if he can't do that, then you have to take the Suns. In the East, I'm taking the Bucks. It's not really a question to me. I think the Bucks are the better team. They have the best player in the series in Giannis. They have the third best player and the fourth best player probably in Holiday and Middleton. Rank them where you want, third or fourth, but I think those are the third and fourth best guys in the series for me. And then you can probably say Atlanta has maybe like fifth, sixth, seventh best. You could honestly make that argument, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. But I think having three of the top four players in the series that, Milwaukee does have three of the top four, it's going to be super hard for Atlanta to climb this mountain that Milwaukee is. And, it's going to be hard to beat Giannis and beat Holiday and beat Middleton, because Holiday we've seen is he's such a good on-ball defender. He was third, I think, in Defensive Player of the Year voting. I don't know if he was actually third, but he was my third probably. And he's insane. He's such a good perimeter defender. it's ridiculous. And it honestly kind of is unfortunate that he was kind of stashed away in New Orleans when he probably should have been on contending teams his whole career. He was on Philly originally, and he was kind of the second man there to Iguodala in that during that era. That team was never amazing, but he ended up going down to New Orleans, and he was probably in New Orleans longer than I wish he was, because it's a pleasure to be able to watch Drew defend in this Eastern Conference Finals, and really the whole playoffs. But he struggled offensively, but defensively he's so good that even if he struggles offensively, you're not going to take him off the court. He's a great player, and Middleton's a guy who I rag on, but Middleton's a guy who's he's a bucket getter, and he kind of proved the doubters wrong in that Brooklyn series to a certain extent, because obviously Kyrie and Harden were pretty much out. I mean, Harden was pretty much out that entire series, although he did come back, but he was a shell of himself. He did kind of prove the doubters wrong, because Brooklyn was the finals favorites pretty much the whole year, and Middleton, the Bucks beat the Nets, and Middleton was the second guy on that Bucks team pretty much. He was the second best offensive player. So, he looked legit. He looked legit. And I'm not telling you that he should be a second best player on a championship winning team, because 9 times out of 10 in the NBA that he can't be that. But this year I think he can. I think he can, with all the injuries and the short and condensed season. I think he can be a number 2, and I think the Bucks can easily win the World Series, or not the World Series, the NBA Finals, World Series, NBA Finals this year with Middleton as their number 2. That's pretty much it, though. In other news, I guess the lottery happened. If you want to hear kind of my lottery reaction and my mock draft, check out the link in the description to my Clips channel. Me and Brandon will upload on there sometimes reactions, or maybe just just random stuff, kind of just stuff that's not the podcast itself. Feel free to check that out. But that's pretty much it. Nothing too much in MLB, although I will talk shortly about the MLB. Recently, they kind of had their spider tack ban. It's essentially the substance that helps you kind of grip the ball. I think it's called spider tack. But essentially, batting average has gone up pretty significantly. I want to say it's gone up by at least 0.1, as in like from 230 to 240. I think the average was like 236, maybe the like average batting average. It was like 236 or something before the ban, and now it's up significantly, which, I really think baseball needs to make changes to their game, and it's something I'm not passionate about, quote unquote, but it's something that as somebody who's willing to just kind of change sports, like I think football is great at it. They're great at adapting, right? Like NFC Championship game 2018, the pass interference rule, right? Everybody knows, everybody's clamoring for it. Make the changes to this pass interference rule. It's garbage. It should be reviewable, because stuff like that can't happen in an NFC Championship game. They change it and they make it reviewable. NBA is willing to make changes on the fly. They're willing to do whatever it takes to make their sport the best sport possible. And I think baseball has struggled mightily with that. And if you want to blame Manfred, blame Manfred. If you want to blame whoever, blame whoever. I kind of blame the players and Manfred. I think I blame the players much more than other people do. I just think the players are people that for some reason, they don't care about, the greatness of their sport. And I guess they shouldn't, right? But the commissioner needs to enforce it, and, the front offices all need to enforce it, and they need to make sure that their sport's the best sport possible, because the reality of the situation is, and I know baseball, big baseball fans aren't going to want to hear it, but the reality of the situation is the sport's dying, right? I mean, back in, 10 years ago or whatever, baseball was the number 1/number 2 sport. Football was overtaking it. And, there's nothing you can really do about football overtaking it. That was going to happen. But, baseball it's been losing interest in terms of, young people wanting to play it. I know for a fact that, younger kids, they would rather play basketball. They would rather play football. Obviously the head injuries have, hurt that, but they'd rather play basketball. Hockey's more exciting to watch. Basketball's more exciting to watch. Football's more exciting to watch. And, baseball is just boring to watch, and it's some of it is inherent with the sport that, it's kind of is, America's pastime. It's something you throw on the TV and you kind of, you're almost multitasking watching it. You're not sitting down concentrating on the game like maybe you would with the basketball or a hockey game or even a football game to that extent. But you need to make changes, and I think spider tack was a change that you need to make, because you can't have pitchers, like you can't have like so many no-hitters that you lose track of them, right? Like there's too many no-hitters. I think there's more no-hitters than cycles this season, which is surprising. It's just, there's just not enough action in the game, and the games honestly take way too long. If we're gonna be frank, the games take way too long. There's 162 games in a season, and these games take longer than like basketball games, which is ridiculous. They just take way too long. They need to be shorter. There needs to be more action. You could argue the mound should be moved back. I'm like, if I'm in charge of baseball, I'm willing to listen to whatever, because the sport's dying. People are losing interest. It's like a video game, right? Like I'll put it into a video game analogy. You have Fortnite, right, which is like your instant endorphins and instant excitement game, because you load into the game, you drop, you go to wherever you want to go, and you can you get into the action instantly, right? Call of Duty, you get into the action instantly. And then you look at a game like, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, like the board game. It's, you got to set up the board game and all that. Even if it's online, there's so much setup and there's so much involved in it that you have to spend time learning it and all that type of stuff. You can't just jump into the action and get that instant just excitement, right? That in today's day and age, you kind of need to be able to provide some of that. And I think that's what baseball kind of needs to learn. They can't be the Dungeons and Dragons of sports when basketball's over here basically like Fortnite. It's just attracting the youngs. It's attracting old people too. I mean, even older people like enjoy basketball much more than baseball too at this point. I just, if it continues like this, I think baseball will eventually not die, right? It's not going to die completely, but it will get to the point where it's the fourth biggest sport in our nation, and hockey will overtake it. I don't know if you want to say hockey's overtaken it or not, but I think it's closer than it's ever been, for sure. Even in, places where baseball's big, like Massachusetts with the Red Sox. I mean, the Bruins are pretty close, and, the Sox are a good team right now, and maybe they should have more hype around them. But honestly, I think there's been not much talk about the Sox, which is surprising. And, obviously the Sox and the Yankees and the Dodgers and the big market teams are always going to be, talked about, but the sport's dying, and they need to make changes, whether it's, I know they tried like the pitch clock and stuff like that, but I think they need to make bigger changes, just shorten the game, make it more exciting. There can't be, I love people like DeGrom, and DeGrom's a guy who's just dominant. He's insane, right? But we can't have every single pitcher throwing no-hitters. I mean, that's ridiculous. We've seen that spider tack being removed now has made, honestly, great changes for me personally. It may not be noticeable over the course of a game or two games, but over the course of a season, it will be noticeable. I hope baseball continues to crack down on it and hammer down on it. Red Sox pitcher Garrett Richards, he has been complaining a lot, and a lot of pitchers have, like Max Scherzer of the Nationals has been complaining a lot too. Those are two teams that I don't know if I'd say I follow them super closely, but I follow them. I follow those two teams, and those are two pitchers that have complained so much about it, and they're trying to bring up, honestly, kind of just lame excuses. Like, Max was like talking about how he almost had, I forget what player it was, but he almost hit a player in the head because of no spider tack. But if you look at the numbers, baseball has been hitting batters at, I think, a record-setting pace this year, or at least recently at a record-setting rate. I don't think it has anything to do with the spider tack, really. Maybe that particular, batter, but in general, no. I just think pitchers need to learn to deal without it, because pitchers like Garrett Richards, ever since they took away his spider tack and his his drugs, essentially, like he's been a lot worse. He's been pretty bad. He's been really bad. And I'm, there's a middle ground, I guess. Like they should be allowed to have some stuff, like obviously rosin they should be allowed to have, but like spider tack, this homemade stuff that the dugout managers, I don't even know what there's a guy in the Angels who pretty much is a borderline drug dealer with they release texts and stuff, and I'm not gonna get into it too much. Maybe I will in a future episode, but just reading the text is ridiculous, right? I mean, it's like drugs. I remember like Adam Wainwright texted him, Scherzer, Verlander, Cole, all these guys, and it's almost like they're talking about drugs. And there was a Venmo transaction between the Angels guy and some big pitcher. I don't know if it was Wainwright or maybe Michael Wacha or some pitcher, some name-worthy pitcher. And the Venmo transaction was just labeled as stuff. So they clearly know it's against the rules. They clearly know they can't just, this isn't just this isn't, I don't know, it's not like they're buying and selling baseball bats, right? They're buying and selling a legal substance that's not allowed to be used in the MLB, and I'm happy that baseball has is putting an end to it, and I hope they continue to, and I hope they hammer down on pitchers who continue to use it. Suspensions, no pay, fines, all of it. I want it all because I love baseball, and I want baseball to do well, and I want it to be a national sport again. It's not always been a super national sport like basketball, I guess. But I want it to be big, and I want it to be on that same kind of par with baseball and basketball and football, where on the whole 9 yards specifically, I can talk, I don't know about equally between all three sports, but I like to be able to talk about baseball more than I do, to be honest. I'd like to. And honestly, I mean, I can, right? But in terms of what will get viewers, I think for the most part, there's more people that want to consume content about basketball and football, especially nationally. Locally, I think baseball is kind of a local thing where, people in New York care about the Yankees, all that. And basketball is a little bit different because, it's almost like a players league. Like people in Boston, obviously they're fans of the Celtics, but they also love LeBron and they love KD and they love Curry and they love all these guys. And it's a little bit different. So it's easier to, there's more consumers for the national basketball scene, but I'd love to see baseball kind of, pick it up a little bit. And whether it's marketing or, like I was talking about with the spider tack, all these changes, I'd love to see them. I'd love to see baseball could become a bigger sport and revive itself because, yeah, it's a good sport. It's fun. So yeah, but I think that's pretty much it. Nothing too much recently in terms of football. Nothing really. Just trying to think, look around, but no, there hasn't been much. So that's pretty much it for this episode. I appreciate everybody who stayed till the end. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And like I was talking about, check out that clips channel in the description. There'll be videos that I posted recently there, so check that out. And we will be back in a future episode, and hopefully this one will have Brandon in it. I'm assuming it will. So goodbye, and I will see you guys later.